home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Taos of Baltimore. We call ourselves Baltimore Positive. We hope you set a spot out on your radio dial if you're driving around, or you find us out on the YouTube, or you find us wherever you find us. 26 years into this, it's all presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I have Ravens Scratch Offs. We'll be giving these away on Friday at Mama's on the half shell. We're going to be in Owings Mills with my man Finn. Got some big news. I think Mike Warren's going to come out after 27 years. It'll be the first time I see him since our television show. The things that this radio show inspires. Certainly on Monday night, the Ravens played mostly inspired football down in Tampa. Extra day, a lot of sitting around. A lot of heat on national television for this matchup as well. Luke Jones joins us now in the aftermath. You can check out his work at Baltimore Positive and his pre-game thoughts and then post-game thoughts. And dude, if I was going to bet anything, I would have bet the over in this one. I think I was pretty clear on that one. Might have been wrong last week on how many points, but we got some points out of the game on Monday night. But strange ending, the Godwin injury, how good Lamar was, where Derrick Henry had disappeared, and they insert him, and the next thing you know, you're trying to catch him again. This thing has become a well-oiled machine, and more than that, they might be the best team in the NFL right now, Luke. I don't think the Chiefs would want to play them this week.
Well, consider the fact that Lamar Jackson threw 5 touchdown passes on Monday night, and Kansas City, to their credit, hey, they're the 2-time defending Super Bowl champs. They've won 3 in the last 5 years, like all that, right?
Including
that
2 in a row
change.
against the Ravens, which is the most important thing.
But Patrick Mahomes has 6 touchdowns all year long. I mean, it just speaks to where this Ravens offense is, where Kansas City is. Look, that's still the asterisk. That's still what looms in January, presumably. But in the meantime, the defense is another story, and we'll continue to talk about that. But Lamar Jackson and this Ravens offense left no doubt, even after the first quarter where they did not score, and they concluded the first quarter with 22 yards, and most of those came on the completion to Charlie Kolar, literally on the last play of that first quarter. They end up amassing 41 points, over 500 yards of offense, 5 touchdowns for Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry, who late in the third quarter hadn't really been much of a factor, he ends up having Derrick Henry-like numbers and finishing things, or as close to finishing as you can call what we saw in the fourth quarter with some of the weirdness. But, I mean, this is, if it's not the best team in the NFL right now, it's certainly the best offense in the NFL. And I think the Ravens left no doubt on that front. And as I'm writing at BaltimorePositive.com right now, the MVP race is on. The race to January is officially on. I mean, I've seen enough out of this football team that's where the expectations are. That's how great Lamar Jackson has been through 7 games. It's how great this offense has been through 7 games. And it's not a perfect operation, but boy, it is explosive and multi-pronged. And whether you're Todd Bowles or an NFC team or an AFC team, or you've got a good offense or a great defense or whatever, I don't know how you look at this Ravens offense right now and have any level of confidence that you're going to stop them. That's how good they've been. And it was on full showcase on Monday Night Football for the world to see. And the Ravens on that front, again, left no doubt as far as where they rank, at least on that side of the ball. And there's not another quarterback playing the kind of football Lamar Jackson is right now.
Yeah, I was going to put my selfie up from Super Bowl 35 and say my selfie at Tampa is better than your selfie in Tampa. We had some fans down there, and we don't play there much. And anytime I see it, I think of that moment and those moments and Brandon Stokely and Ray Lewis, who was talked about during the broadcast into the evening. But all these years later, I think to myself, all right, they were 0-2 to start the season. If I'm writing a Purple Rain 3, they were 0-2 to start the season, and they're doing what they're doing at this point. The 0-2 thing is a terrible cross to bear in regard to making playoffs, in regard to winning Super Bowls, in regard to all those statistical anomalies. And then you point out, like, oh yeah, in the first quarter they didn't do anything, and they still scored 41 points. And it wasn't off of interception returns for touchdowns. It was on, we're going to run a play, and you might stop it at the line of scrimmage, and you might be looking up 80 yards later at our running back in the end zone, or you might catch him at the 5-yard line because you take an angle. But I would think, and I'm going to talk to a lot of people in Cleveland this week. I don't. Well, why? Because I like Cleveland's misery. That's why. I don't know why else. But I'm going to talk to some Browns fans. I think the perception for the Ravens and the reality in regard to speed, in regard to this NFC thing where you can't prepare for them, the thing that I was not prepared for, and I don't think you were prepared for either, 7 weeks into this, and certainly not when they were 0-2, was the offensive line and the scheming part of this. As things work or don't work, Monken is going to push buttons. Lamar's going to push buttons to say this is working, this isn't working. Mark Andrews wasn't working the first month of the season, right? I mean, there were things that just were like, that seems a little broken. Right now, Ronnie Stanley looks like he just got drafted and hasn't given up a sack, hasn't given up pressures. His health is back. We don't talk about his health anymore after spending 3 years of talking about his health. But that being said, he's a blue chip player. It's like he was a lottery pick. He was expected to be almost as good as John Ogden. So Linderbaum is a first round draft pick. Despite holding calls, jumping a little bit, penalties on the offensive line, the actual execution part, um, even when there are penalties, and I'll bring up McCary playing left guard and what happened to Voorhees and I saw Big Ben Cleveland on the sideline at the end of the game. But the names of the players and the concern we had for the offensive line to me was the operation. And I think Monken is moving closer to genius level in calling these plays. Of course, having Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers and weapons will make you that. But the execution part of the offensive line in being able to execute what they wanted to do, there was a lot of question about that in the offseason. And 7 games in, just not anymore. It's not the offensive line's a question mark. The offensive line is built to do this. It feels to me.
It's certainly good enough, right? I mean, and we talked about that before the season. We talked about the fact that they don't necessarily have to have the 1993 Dallas Cowboys, right? They don't have to have the best offensive line in the NFL because of Lamar Jackson and because of Derrick Henry now being added to that mix. Just be good enough. And they've been more than good enough, right? I mean, it's not perfect. I don't
Well,
think
if your pass protection sucks, Lamar will just move around.
Well,
that's what you have going for you. Joe Flacco can't do that.
That's part of the equation, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, going into that, that's why it was so jarring early in the game. Lamar gets sacked on back-to-back plays when he had been sacked 7 times total over the first 6 games of the season. But that's part of the math here. That's part of the equation. That's part of what any great pass rusher, whether you're talking about someone like Crosby in week 2 or Chris Jones in week 1, we're going to see T.J. Watt here in the coming weeks. Myles Garrett this coming Sunday. Any of those guys on down, it's not just, oh, you have to beat your man. It's also, I need to get Lamar Jackson down, or I need to be disciplined in my rush lane that he doesn't just take off and run for 40 yards. I mean, there's just an answer for everything. And you just said it. I mean, whether we're talking about the offensive line or Todd Monken or the running backs, throw Justice Hill in there too, what he continues to do. Think about some of the chunk plays, that chunk play that allowed them to get a field goal when they had a drive that was literally going backwards. But the tight ends, the wide receivers now, I mean, not just Zay Flowers. How about Rashad Bateman and what he's become over the last 3 or 4 weeks? At the very least, looking like a really good number 2 wide receiver. So they just have answers across the board. And, you mentioned Mark Andrews over the first month of the season. Was it that he was broken, or is it just there's one football, right? I mean, there's literally one football to go around. And that's part of what also has made this so impressive is how selfless everyone is in the sense of, okay, if you're running the ball, go look at how the wide receivers and tight ends block downfield. If you're throwing the ball,
or the quarterback blocking downfield. He did that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how many times you're going to see
I don't know that I like that.
Sure. But you love it. You love the effort. You love the mindset, though. But you just look at everything they do. What the passing game. It's not just the offensive line. I mean, how about what Justice Hill has done in blitz pickup by and large over the course of the season? So, I mean, whatever they decide to do, whatever the play call is, whatever the adjustment is pre-snap, it is just such a scary operation for opponents to try to defend. And okay, it can still get sloppy from time to time. To your point, yeah, they still need to cut down on the penalties. That's something that has been an issue this year. There's no doubt about it. Putting aside what's going on the defensive side of the ball, there's still those occasional moments where you scratch your head. I mean, think about the lead that they have, and then they throw a backwards pass that turns into a turnover, and ever so briefly, not that I really felt that Tampa Bay was going to come back at that point in time, but they do things like that that'll leave the door cracked for the opposition at times. We've seen that. But beyond that, when you look at it just straight up, when you look at them just trying to operate, whether it's the passing game or the ground attack, I mean, how do you stop them? I mean, how do you stop them? I mean, that's the thing. And Todd Bowles is the latest to try to blitz and blitz and blitz and blitz. Go look at Lamar's numbers against the blitz. A few years ago, we think back to that Thursday night game where Miami did the cover zero thing and completely overwhelmed this offense under Greg Roman at the time. That was 3 years ago. Look at what Lamar's done against the blitz largely since then, and especially this year. That's not a that's not a best practice anymore. I mean, statistically, it's certainly not paying off for the opposition. So, they played a lot of zone. We've seen other teams play man against the Ravens. I mean, you can stack the box and then, well, they're going to throw the ball over your head. And how about the fact that Lamar threw a beautiful deep ball to Rashad Bateman in stride, which, that's been the perceived weakness the last couple years in terms of deep ball accuracy. So they just have answers for everything. And again, it begins with number 8, it begins with your quarterback, but it's across the board. It's a collective effort what they're doing on offense right now. And even when they get off to a slow start, and even when their defense gets off to a slow start, that opening drive was not pretty. And then the Ravens didn't score. Only the second time all year they haven't scored on their opening drive. Tampa Bay scores again. It's 10-0 as the first quarter concludes, and you barely had the football. No problem. Right? I mean, literally, it was no problem. And the Ravens, before you know it, they had control of the football game. So, I mean, I just look at this football team right now, and again, the defense is another story, and we'll continue to talk about that. And for as well as they played for the middle portion of that game, they didn't finish it very well. I mean, Ed Reed was on the Manning cast, and I happened to go back and look, and he made the comment that they thought they had the game over, and they still don't understand the other side of finishing and being a championship team right now. So that's part of the overall narrative for this team. But again, Lamar Jackson in this offense, it's just it's better than it's ever been because they don't have the defense doing the kind of heavy lifting that it's done in the past. In 2019, especially as the year went on, the defense played at a very high level. Last year, as great as the offense was, and it was a great offense, AFC Championship game performance aside, go look at what the numbers were. They were right there with the very best offenses in the NFL, and Lamar won the MVP, of course. But their defense was doing very heavy lifting as well. This has been much more of offense, and the defense looks okay at times. They stop the run, but they're giving up points, and they're giving up a lot of yards through the air and all of that. So this offense has had more pressure on it to score, keep scoring, and they've been up to the task. So, I mean, it's 7 weeks in. We're still over a month away from Thanksgiving. And I think what happened at the end of that football game, not just what happened at the end, look at what happened to Tampa Bay with Mike Evans dropping the ball. That's such a turning point when he drops a touchdown and gets hurt in the process. And then what happens, unfortunately, to Chris Godwin at the end of the game, whether he should have been in there or not, that's a discussion for Tampa Bay, that market to have. But it's a reminder of just how fragile this thing can be, knowing that on any given play, this can be a very cruel game, knowing just the violence and the brutality of it. So from that standpoint, that's where you look at this Ravens team right now and you just say, don't waste this. I mean, this is a special offense. We've known this is a special quarterback for years now, and he's doing everything at this point in time. There's really not anything you can point to that Lamar Jackson is not doing as a quarterback or as the leader of this offense. So keep this thing going. And now it's a matter of continuing to keep it going and trying to stay as healthy as you can. And we'll talk about Marlon Humphrey at some point here and find out what's going on with his knee. But boy, it's a heck of an offense. It really is, and that's on the heels of being someone who has made clear that they've had some amazing offenses here in recent years. This isn't something that's brand new, but it is more dynamic, more complete than it's ever been, in my opinion.
And a little bit more quick strike than
Yeah,
anything we saw in 19 or even the success of last year, where I prefer the Raven 14 play 81-yard, 9-minute drive. Games get over at 3:40 in the afternoon when they're at 1 o'clock. Um, that's not what this was. And the strangest part, at some point I tweeted it after the third score, I'm like, they're winning and they're getting outplayed. And it's just one play, one mistake. And in the case of Tampa, um, Mayfield throwing the interception in the corner, which was just unthinkable. I mean, easiest interception in Marlon Humphrey's career before the second one. And I thought, man, that's something that the Ravens don't do much of. Drive the field, get down to the 10-yard line, and Lamar throws a dumb pick right into the hands of the safety. He's done it over 7 years, but I can't even count it on one hand how often that's happened. And the Tony Banks play, as we would say back in the day.
yeah.
Um, the care that they have for the football and their ability to strike at any point very quickly, throw the ball over your head if they have to, which he did again on Monday night. There isn't anything he can't do, but there's nothing Baker Mayfield can't do except execute when they're down on the goal line, when they have a touchdown, except Mike Evans dropping the ball in his hand and pulling his hamstring I mean, there were a couple of really key plays on the Tampa side that would have won the game for them, and we might not be talking about it the same way, but when you can't tackle Derrick Henry and when you can't get them off the field in 4 plays, they don't need to go 14 plays down the field if they can do it in 5 or 6.
Yeah, and you just mentioned that. I mean, you kind of think about Derrick Henry, and in the fourth quarter, you think about your 4-minute offense, right? Where you want to milk the clock. And I'd say, well, I guess the problem would be don't block quite as well on those toss plays, and Derrick Henry go down when someone tries to tackle him. I mean, you know, if an 80-yard run is going to present itself, you're going to take it, right? So yeah, I mean, it's just so quick strike in so many different ways. And you said it. I mean, the Mike Evans drop and hamstring injury, but later on that drive, I mean, on the interception itself. And by the way, that was a good play by Marlon Humphrey there, where he kind of peeled off to be underneath to make that play.
Well, Mayfield didn't see him. I mean,
right,
yeah.
not excusing Mayfield, but it was a good play by Marlon Humphrey. But what was really striking to me, go look at the beginning of that play. Irving was open in the left flat for a touchdown. I mean, he was wide open, and Mayfield didn't throw him the ball. I mean, that would have been a touchdown there. Look, the way the Ravens offense was humming after the first quarter, after the first drive, I mean, they didn't. It's not that they had a bad first quarter offensively. They didn't have the ball, right? I mean, they had the ball for a handful of plays, and that was it. Any team's going to punt occasionally, but that play have made that a closer football game over the course of the night? Maybe, probably. May not have turned into a blowout the way that it was. I mean, I know the final score for anyone who didn't watch it, say, oh, it was a 10-point game. It wasn't that close. We know that, but
But the
yeah, I
thing that
mean,
made it that close was the pick and Evans dropping the ball and not getting points. And so at that
sure.
point, they left 14 points on the field and then turned around and
Well,
got the ball run up their ass. Yeah,
that was the same drive, though. Keep in mind,
correct.
remember that.
Two
Yeah,
different directions.
no,
Right.
but one possession in a game like that. I mean, you can't waste possessions. I've made the point, and obviously this was a bad example of it because Tampa Bay actually did run the ball fairly well against them. They didn't gash them, but they ran for over 100 yards. First time anyone's done that against the Ravens all season against their run defense. But this is the kind of offense when you're going up against this team and its ability to score points. You obviously cannot turn the ball over. You can't punt. You've got to be willing to take chances. I thought another underrated it wasn't a turning point because the Ravens had kind of taken control. Instead of trying that 55-yard field goal, I think Tampa Bay should have gone for it on 4th and 4. I mean, I really do. I mean, because you're at a point where field goals weren't going to cut it against this Ravens offense, in my opinion, at that point in time where you're chasing the scoreboard at that point. And I felt as the game went on, and I if you remember, I mentioned this about the Washington game as well. I think you get to a point where if you're down 7 or 10 points to this Ravens offense, I think running the ball is kind of a wasted play. I mean, I just think you you run the ball on 1st and long, or 1st and 10 or 2nd and long. I think you're just putting yourself in peril, quite frankly. And that's one thing. I guess that's a compliment to the defense, but also just it speaks to how tough it is going up against this offense right now, because it feels, I would assume Baker Mayfield over the course of that game, and Tampa Bay over the course of that game, it's just like, man, we have to be perfect if we want any shot against these guys. If I'm Cleveland right now, if I'm Denver, who's going to play the Ravens after that, if I'm any of these teams coming up, Cincinnati's a great example of this. I mean, look how well the Bengals played offensively in that game, and they still lost because their kicker didn't make a long field goal. You have to play nearly perfect football to beat the Ravens right now, and hope that the Ravens, as I said, they're still apt to do some head scratching things over the course of 60 minutes.
Throwing the ball backwards. You mean
Yeah,
like that?
throwing the ball backwards, or a penalty where you just kind of scratch your head and say, although I will say this, a couple of those holding penalties, I mean, the one on Faalele, that one, and you know me, I don't complain about officiating much. They still scored, they overcame that, but beyond those types of plays where the Ravens kind of beat themselves or there's something self-inflicted, I mean, you have to be just about perfect. And this defense certainly is far from perfect and has had its issues early in the game and then late in the game closing this one out. But is the defense so bad that you can score every single time you touch the ball? That's kind of what you need to do if you have much hope of beating the Ravens at this point in time. So it is a very, very, very difficult formula for the opposition right now. And again, it starts with what Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken are doing, the offensive line, this group of wide receivers. I mean, Zay Flowers hurt his ankle in that game. You can kind of tell it wasn't a big factor. He toughed through it. I mean, I really commend him for that. I know some of the David Chows of the social media football doctor types were kind of wondering if he was going to be able to finish that game, and he did, to his credit. But yeah, they've had guys step up, and to this point, again, we'll wait and see about Marlon Humphrey on the defensive side, but they're very healthy, and it's just for me to sit here and try to say, well, I'm really concerned about this or I'm really concerned about that. I mean, this offense is just absolutely cooking to a degree that it's rarely found, even in some of Lamar and some of their most recent best seasons. It's just incredibly difficult to stop right now. And it's the big reason why the Ravens are 5-2, and that 0-2 start is a distant memory at this point.
Imagine if Pat Ricard could just catch the ball, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I mean, the embarrassment of riches. They throw the ball to Charlie Kohler, right? Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke. We're going to be gathering on Friday over at Mama's on the Half Shell in Owings Mills, celebrating the Ravens, getting ready for the Browns game, getting ready for World Series Game 1. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I have Raven scratch-offs to give away. This has been a pretty lucky batch. Also, our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, getting Luke back and forth out to Owings Mills for a short week this week. The Maryland Oyster Tour is up and running. That is brought to you by our friends at Curio Wellness, as well as Liberty Pure Solutions. 1-800-CLEAN Water. They take care of my water. They take care of my well water, as well as all of my plumbing needs. That's what they do at Liberty Pure. And, of course, our friends at Curio Wellness and Foreign Daughter. I have the Move product on my back right now. Not everything there, it has psychoactivity. A lot of things there have real decent health benefits that we have been trying to express to you. So find our friends over Curio Wellness in Far and Dodder. They're always doing daily deals and always there for adult use and educating folks. That's what we're here for as well. Luke's trying to educate us on football. We're going to get educated on a short business week with the Cleveland Browns and the residue of the Cleveland Guardians. I have Munch Bishop and some of my Cleveland Mafia, my goons, Daryl Ryder, amongst others. Red Guy he's busy this this week. He's calling a whole bunch of MAC football this week. So Ray Guy's not going to be here, but has promised me that he'll be here for the Requiem later in the year. I actually talked to Dave Zastidal the other day. He had a little eye surgery here this week, so he can't join us this week, but he'll be coming on before it's all over because we need to get special teamers in here. Left-hander who can throw the ball a little bit out in Ohio. He is Luke Jones. Find his work out on Instagram, anywhere social travels, anywhere we travel. It is our 26th anniversary, and we're going to be out doing crab cake tours, having fun throughout the holidays as the Ravens continue to win games. We're going to continue to talk Ravens football and a big victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Yuccaneers, I called them after a couple of penalties. I was waiting for the creamsicle and the swashbuckler to come back. We'll have more on the Bucs and the Ravens. I'm Nestor. He's Luke. Stay with us. We're WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.